Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss about how we can load external data into ServiceNow. For that we need to create a data sources. The data sources defines where we are getting the data and what type of data that we are getting it into ServiceNow. And ServiceNow compatible or provide options for us to get the data from various different data sources. For example, if you have your data in Oracle database or SQL database, you can connect to using the JDBC drivers to get the data into ServiceNow. For example, if you have a data over the HTTP, you can use the REST integrations to get the you can use REST integration calls to load the data from external sources into ServiceNow. And also, if you have the data in the file format, for example, XML, CSV, or Excel files, ServiceNow also is provides an option to load the data into ServiceNow target table. What is the process to get the data from external to ServiceNow? We can look at high level. It can be categorized into three things. First, you need to create the data source, and this data source loads the data into a staging table. Right now, the data is already in ServiceNow. Then if you want to load the data from the staging table into the target table, which is the ServiceNow table, you can write different types of transform rules to manipulate the data from input set table or the staging table to the target table. All right. So as we discussed, the data we'll have a different data sources that we have, and it can load the data into an import set table, and you have the transform map to load the data from import set table to target table, that's ServiceNow tables. So this import set table or the staging table is a temporary placeholder. So first, when the data gets into ServiceNow, it stores at the import set table, and that import set table we will write some transform maps or transform rules to manipulate the data to move the data into a target table. Okay, before we are going any further, first let's understand right now what the use case that we are going to do here. The use case that we are doing here is we got the list, an Excel sheet with the user data, and we want this data to be loaded into a service now. As I said, this is in a CSV file formatted file. This CSV file contains various columns. For example, this first row, or the first row of the sheet is it consists the column labels or the headers of the Excel sheet. For example, first name, last name, company name. While we are loading the data into an import set table, the fields will be created based on the first row of the header. How it will be done? Let's look at this an example. So go to the ServiceNow instance, create data sources, create data sources. We are in needed application scope. Let's go here, make that in a global scope. So these are the data sources which are available in our instances. Let's create one. So this data source, it will have this configuration page where it will ask you to give the name of this data source. Let's give the name of the name of the data source as load user data. Load user data, and also the import set label load user data. So once you have this import set label, then the import set table name will automatically gets populated based on the import set label. And this is a file type, and the format is CSV. So, and file retrieval method is attachment. So this attachment is, you can add this as an attachment to the file. So let's go here, download this. So it gets downloaded here and attach this file to the data source. Attach this file to the data source. So right now we created our data source. We have given the name to the data source and the import set label as well. So once we submit this, what will be happening here is this is the data source that we've created. This signifies what type of data that we are going to get and where this data we are getting it. Is it from JDBC or it is from file? These are the different options that we have. Okay. Next, we can load the data. To load the data, we can do the few things. You can go to the system import set and load data. So go here, system import sets, load data. And the data source that we want to get it here is what is the data source that we have? This is for load user data. Load user data, existing table. Okay. Either we can go here and you have an option here, load all records from the data source. So this is our data source and click on load all records. What will be happening here is it checks whether this imports a table which is specified on the data source is available or not. If it is already available, then it creates the data. If it is not available, then it creates an imports a table and loads the data. So right now it is already loaded 500 records. Let's go back to here and see the columns that we have. So if you look at this, you have these columns. How this columns been created by the data source while loading the data? So it reads the first row as it's the headers of the columns and it creates the data into this import set table. If you look at it, you have address, city, company name, country, email, first name, last name, location, manager, phone number one, state, and web. This is how the data source is good enough to read as the first row of this CSV sheet as the column labels and it gets this data. How many rows that we have in this sheet? We have totally 500 rows in the sheet. So if you look at it, we also have the 500 rows been loaded into the import set table. Right now, the data is already there in the import set table. But before going any further, let's look at what is this table is all about. Let's go here, click on the table, configure table. So if you look at it here, the label that we have given, the name that we have given for the import set. But if you look at here, this extends an import set row table. This extends and imports a row table. Any staging table which is used for transform maps or data sources to load the data from external system to the ServiceNow, this should be extending this import set row. Based on this table, there is a lot of functionality that gets added and we can do the import set process very smoothly. So at the same time, get the table name as well. Table name. Is it we already have the table name? Yeah. So if you look at the rows that gets with the import set row is this. This gets an import set. If there is an error, what is the number of the row? All this information will be available from this. All the columns will be available from this import set row. Okay, that's fine. What is the next thing? We know that this data needs to be goes to the ServiceNow sys user table. Let's open the sys user table. Sys user users open any one of the record. So we have first name, last name, and we have email address. and also we have business phone and mobile phone, and we also have the department. These are the bare minimum values that we have. We also have the user ID. So how can we load this information to this table? So for that we have to create a transform map on this data source or on the staging table. So you have a transform map stretch, click on this transform maps. As of now, there is no transform map created on this staging table. Let's create one. So right now we are going to create a transform map. But if you look at this configuration that are available here, we have to give a user defined name to this transform map. Let's give that load user data into sys user table. So what is your source table? The source table is always the staging table, the import set table that we have just created. This is where we have the data. Then what is our target table? The target table here is sys user table. The user table, the backend name for this user table is sys user. This is the table. And the order is 100. Let's keep that as in 100. Then you have a business rules. So when you check this business rule, if there is a data gets loaded into this user table, it creates every record one by one. If there is insert update operations will be there, it creates those business rules. Also, if you have a flow designer flows or workflows are also configured on it, or notifications configured on it, everything will triggers. Because of, if you want to trigger everything, then you have to check the run business rule. Enforce mandatory fields. So if you have any mandatory fields that are available on the target table, you can enforce this option, enforce the mandatory fields option as well. Copy empty fields. For example, if the data coming from the imports a table, the respective columns have the empty values, it clears out those data. So I don't want this to be cleared right now. I'm leaving as it is. Create a new record on empty Coalesce fields. This option we will get it, will get discussed in a bit later in this session. Let's save this. So we have created the transform map. From the transform map, we also need to explicitly make what is the column that we are interested in from the import set table to the target table. So we have to map the column to column mapping, so that the data from this column on the target table directly inserts into the column of the target table, from source table to target table. For that, we have to do the field to field mappings. We have an option here, auto map matching fields. If you click on it, if there is any matching fields from the target to source, it gets created. Let's see here if it gets created or not. Yes, it gets created, these options. So you have a department, you have a city, you have a state, you have an email, you have a zip, you have a first name, you have a last name, and the location. Next, I would like to create it for um, address, last name, first name, email is there. Phone number one, phone number two. Phone number one will be in the sys user, it will be business phone. Phone number two will be mobile phone. Let's go here. Let's go here, create that mapping. So what is the source field? The phone number one. Let's go here and give that as a business phone and create next field map. Create next field map. That is phone number two. Phone number two, and this will be on target field business phone or mobile phone, I guess. Mobile phone. Submit. So right now we have created a field to field maps. So you can also here mapping assistant. It also does the same thing. If you click on here, it gives you the field maps that we have right now. So you have a phone number to business phone, department to department, city to city, state to state, email to email, zip to zip of the um, sysuser table, first name from the target table, first name of sysuser table, location. So location should be this, right? And last name should be this. Okay, location should be this. Okay, let's go back and do that manually. Phone, department, city, email, first name. So the target field is mobile phone and the field that we want is phone number 2. Let's select that and update this. So right now we've created a transform map as well. Next thing is to click on the transform so that data gets loaded into the target table to the source table. Transform it. Let's go to the import set. So in this import set, we have total how many records? 500 records been there. How many inserts are happened? 500 inserts. Is there an update? 0. Is there anyone skipped? Is there any errors? No. Let's go to the sysuser table and see how many records been we can see right now. So there is total 1127 records. So the recent 500 been created right now. We can also check, go back here, created on today, created on today, run this. So these are all 500 records that we created as of now. But if you look at it, user ID is empty right now. User ID is empty right now. So to get this user ID, we have to do one more thing here. We can use the transform event script to manipulate the data. As of now, we haven't done any manipulation here. We just placed our data from target table to the source table. If you want to do any manipulations on the import set, what we can do? So you can go back here on the transform map. We can go back here in the transform map and we can create transform scripts. We can create a transform script so that the scripts will execute and manipulate the data the way that we want it. Otherwise, we can also create field to field maps, create new here. The field map that we want to execute, the field that we want to set it on target table is, what is this field? This is the username. This is the username. The user ID. What is the backend name? The username. This is what we want to set. Go back to here. Target field is username. This is a user ID. And I don't have any direct field available on the target table. But my idea would be to make a combination of both first name dot last name. This is what I would like to set it my user ID for the record. If it is a James dot but, I would like to have that small letter James dot but is the user ID. So it is a combination of two fields. So I can use source script here in the field to field map. I can use source field map to the um, source script so that I can use this script to set the username, and I can develop the username based on my needs. What is we are doing here? We are concatenating two values. How can I get the data from the target table? Sorry, source table. You have an object called source dot first name plus a dot. It will be having a dot, then source dot last name. This is the syntax that you are going to place it. But source dot first name, this is all in first camel case. I would like to have all this on lowercase to lowercase and to lowercase. If there is an empty value, this operation will get failed and you will get to see the error. So that I will ensure I have the data for every row on you first name and you last name. If I have the only the data, then I would like to do this. Make this as an var user ID. User ID. Let's define this variable outside of this v. If make it as an empty value, take this var and return this user ID. Okay, right now we already have this data. I don't want to create again the same 500 records one more time by running this, but instead of inserts, I would like to have the updates on the record. But how could I target my updates, not inserts? How do the transform map finds the exact record in the target table? For that, we have a Coalesce. The Coalesce is the unique ID. It will match the record based on the Coalesce that we are going to place it. For example, let's go here. Email address, I would say email address will be the unique value. Based on this email address, we are going to update the records. We are not going to insert the records. We will be updating the records. Let's go here. Where is my Coalesce? This is what I would like to turn this to true. So how this will work here is, before it is going to decide whether I need to insert or update this particular first row, it checks if this it checks the email address and see if there is any record matching with this email address. What is this email address? jbud.@gmail.com. Let's go here. Let's go here. Email is this. If it matches this record, then it won't create a new record. Instead, it updates the record with the new data that we are sending it. That is called a Coalesce. Let's go here. Open one more time the data source. This is the data source, right? We already have this Excel sheet CSV is this data source? This is the transform map. Let's go to the data source. Let's go to the data sources. This is the data source and this already have the CSV sheet already been added. So I'm going to run one more time, load all records. So this is the second time we are loading those 500 records. So loaded data. Let's go to the loaded data. But if you look at here, we already have 1,000 records. But how do the system knows which 500 records that it needs to be processed? Let's go and group by set. So there will be two sets. For every loading of the data in the import set table, it creates a new set with a different number. So when we first loaded the data, it creates with 1001 ends with So that's a one set. Next, when we are loading one more 500, it creates with one more set. If you look at here, this data will be already been inserted. But if you look at the state of here, this is in a pending stage. Even when you are running the transform map, you have to specify against which import set that you are going to run the transform map. For example, if I go to the transform maps here, it will have this transform map. Click on this, and from here you can go click on the transform. You can go click on the transform related link. If you click on the transform related link, then you have to select which import set that you would like to run. See here in the import set, we already have the import set is already been selected as 002 0002, and the imports the transform map that we want to run is this. Let's click on transform and go to the import set. Here, okay, this is gets ignored, but what is the reason to get ignored? Let's go here. No field value changes. No field value changes. So there is something not right. Let's go back one more time to the data source or transform maps. Directly we can access transform maps. This is the transform map that we are working on. Okay, username is there and Coalesce is 0, and username the script. Let's see if there is anything that we need to update on this. If source dot first name and okay, this is a problem. There is some syntax error here. So source dot last name. Update this. Again, you can reprocess the data which we are completed right now, or you can freshly load the data. Since in the previous example we already loaded the data, but we can right now reprocess the already loaded data for the import set too. So once you click on reprocess, all the state of this record change to pending. So click on transform. Same, this is the import set that we would like to run. Click on transform. So right now it is taking time so that we can expect there is something happening or some data is transforming from the import set table to the sys user table, the target table. Let's go to the import set here. Right now, if you look at here, so the second run we executed here. So total how many records gets updated? 500 records gets updated because these 500 records been updated here. If I refresh this, it will have a username right now, that james.bat. And if I go here and if I say created on today, and this all the records right now will have the user ID. But how this user ID been added here? We place the Coalesce so that we don't see a duplicate records being created. We would like to update the existing record. At the same time, we don't have a direct column coming from the import set or the Excel or CSV sheet to have the user ID. We created a source field script. We created a field script wherein we take the first name and last name. So let's go back to here, get the first name and last name, first name and last name. We created this both first name and last name here. Based on this first name and last name, we build the user ID of the particular record. Thank you so much for watching.